The look on Queen Letizia's face lasted maybe 2 seconds, but people online have replayed it thousands of times already. Not because she said anything shocking. Actually, that's the strange part. She didn't say anything at all. And somehow, that silence created one of the biggest conversations surrounding the Spanish monarchy this year. Because the moment Princess Leonor stepped forward during that recent appearance, calm, confident, almost emotionally untouchable, something changed in how people were watching Letizia beside her. It wasn't admiration anymore. It was comparison. And honestly, I think that comparison may be the tragic mistake Letizia can't take back. Not one dramatic scandal, not one leaked argument, not one explosive royal betrayal. A long-term mistake. A human mistake. The mistake of building an image so carefully, that eventually the image becomes emotionally impossible to escape. And once I started thinking about it that way, suddenly years of palace behavior made much more sense to me. Because if you really watch the evolution of Queen Letizia closely, you notice something fascinating. She spent years trying to protect the monarchy from chaos. But in the process, she may have accidentally removed too much humanity from the image itself. And before people get angry, no, I'm not saying Letizia is cold. I actually think the opposite. I think she's someone who learned very early that monarchy in the digital era punishes vulnerability brutally. So she adapted, controlled expressions, perfect timing, disciplined appearances, careful media management. At first, that strategy worked brilliantly. But in 2026, audiences connect differently now. If you're new to Leonor's story, subscribe, I post every day. Because what's happening around the Spanish royal family right now is bigger than gossip. It's a live example of what happens when institutions built on perfection collide with an internet culture obsessed with authenticity. Look at Prince William and Kate Middleton for a second. Their strategy in Britain is emotional warmth. Smiles. Informal moments. Controlled relatability. Now compare that to Spain. Spain feels heavier lately, more disciplined, more symbolic, and Princess Leonor's military journey accelerated that feeling even more. Suddenly, people weren't just watching a royal family. They were watching preparation, pressure, duty, and weirdly enough, Leonor's rise created an unintended problem for Letizia. Because Leonor now represents something emotionally powerful to the public. Visible growth. Audiences feel like they're watching her become someone in real time. That creates attachment. And unfortunately, when audiences emotionally attach to growth, they often become harsher toward figures who already appear fully controlled or fully formed. That's where I think Letizia's tragedy begins. Not in scandal. In contrast. Now here's my personal hot take that most royal commentary completely misses. I don't think Queen Letizia's biggest mistake was trying to control the monarchy's image. Honestly, I think that was necessary after years of royal instability in Spain. The real mistake may have been underestimating how much modern audiences crave emotional imperfection. That sounds simple, but it changes everything. Because today's internet culture doesn't reward flawless public figures anymore. It studies them, questions them, dissects them, tries to locate the hidden crack underneath the perfection. And Letizia's image became so polished over time that people started projecting emotional distance onto her, whether it was fair or not. That projection became reality online. Now every serious expression gets called cold. Every composed appearance gets labeled calculated. Every reserved moment becomes proof of palace tension. That's the dangerous thing about digital narratives. Once they form emotionally, facts barely matter afterward. And I think the palace realized this too late. Now let me say something that might sound controversial. I actually feel sympathy for Letizia lately. Because imagine spending years protecting an institution from collapse, only to realize the culture changed while you were protecting it. That's brutal, especially because I genuinely believe she thought discipline would preserve respect. And for a while, it did. But modern audiences don't automatically respect discipline anymore. They want transparency, relatability, visible struggle. That's why Leonor's military training changed everything emotionally. People watched her sweating, training, enduring pressure. It made her feel reachable. Not because she became less royal, but because effort humanized her. Honestly, if Mr. Beast were running Palace PR in 2026, he'd probably say the exact same thing. Audiences don't emotionally connect to titles anymore, they connect to process. That's why Leonor exploded online. And ironically, I think Letizia herself helped shape that strategy. Which creates the deepest irony in this entire story. The queen accused of emotional distance may have helped create the monarchy's most emotionally relatable figure. That contradiction fascinates me. Now here's another layer nobody talks about enough. Letizia came into royalty as an outsider. That matters psychologically. She wasn't raised with centuries of royal conditioning telling her the institution would automatically survive. She came from journalism and media. She understood how narratives destroy reputations. And honestly, I think she saw danger before everyone else did. That's why she became so controlled. Not because she wanted power for its own sake. Because she understood how fragile modern monarchy had become. But there's a hidden cost to living in constant defensive mode emotionally. Eventually people stop seeing vulnerability in you altogether. And vulnerability is what creates emotional loyalty. That's the part one think became irreversible. Now watch the way people discuss Letizia versus Leonor online lately. With Letizia, people analyze. With Leonor, people empathize. That difference is enormous. And I don't think it happened accidentally. The palace itself may have unintentionally created it through years of image strategy. Now let's connect this to the wider royal world because this is where the conversation gets really interesting. Across Europe, monarchies are evolving differently to survive modern culture. Britain leans into emotional familiarity. Scandinavian royals lean into simplicity. Monaco leans into glamour. Spain increasingly leans into institutional resilience. And Letizia became the face of that resilience. The problem is resilience often looks emotionally hard from the outside. Especially online. And social media always simplifies complex personalities into easy narratives. Cold, strict, distant, controlling. Those labels spread faster than nuance ever can. Now personally, I think one specific mistake changed public perception permanently. Not a speech, not a scandal, an emotional miscalculation. I think the palace assumed audiences would admire perfection forever. But the internet changed the rules. Now people trust imperfection more. That's why celebrities post vulnerable moments constantly. That's why politicians suddenly try to appear authentic. That's why even billionaires now attempt relatability campaigns online. The emotional economy changed, and monarchy changed slower than culture did. That's dangerous. Because once institutions fall emotionally behind the audience, rebuilding connection becomes incredibly difficult. And I think Letizia feels that pressure now every single time she appears publicly. You can almost sense the awareness, the caution, the emotional exhaustion underneath the discipline. And honestly, that's the part one find tragic. Not because she's perfect, not because she's innocent, but because I think she genuinely believed control would protect the monarchy long term. Instead, it may have unintentionally created emotional distance at the exact moment audiences started craving closeness most. Now here's something else I've been thinking about lately. What if Queen Letizia's real mistake wasn't about the public at all? What if it was personal? What if years of carrying the monarchy emotionally forced her into a version of herself that became impossible to relax publicly anymore? That happens to powerful people all the time. The survival role slowly becomes the permanent identity. And once that happens, audiences stop seeing the human underneath. I think that's where Letizia is now. And the rise of Leonor makes that contrast even sharper because Leonor still feels emotionally unfinished to the public. That creates curiosity instead of judgment. People want to see who she becomes. With Letizia, audiences feel like they already decided who she is. That's a much harder position to escape. Now let me be very clear. I do not think Queen Letizia destroyed her image permanently or that Spain has completely rejected her. Those headlines are exaggerated for clicks. But I do think something emotional shifted recently that may be difficult to reverse. Because once audiences emotionally categorize a public figure, every future appearance reinforces the narrative automatically. That's how internet culture works now. And honestly, I think the palace underestimated that reality for years. Especially compared to how aggressively modern public figures manage relatability online. Look at how carefully celebrities, influencers, and even political leaders now engineer human moments. That's not accidental anymore. It's strategy. And monarchy traditionally struggles with that because institutions are built around dignity, not vulnerability. So Queen Letizia ended up trapped between two impossible expectations. Protect the monarchy's authority, while also appearing emotionally accessible enough for internet culture. That balance is almost impossible. And maybe that's the tragic mistake she can't take back. Not one moment, not one decision, but years spent perfecting the image, until the image itself became emotionally difficult for people to love.